Okay, but César, don't you want to be speaking Spanish for your part of the interview?
No, para que hablen español, ahí tienen los subtítulos, ¿verdad? okay, thank you, they have the subtitles. Hola, bienvenidas, bienvenidos y bienvenides al renacer de mi canal de YouTube, porque tenía más de 2 años sin postear absolutamente nada. Tiempo en el que estuve viajando por muchos países, principalmente en Canadá, narrando en otros idiomas, conociendo otras culturas y viviendo las aventuras de un viaje. Ustedes saben que me encanta viajar por el mundo y bueno, en esta ocasión Canadá fue un viaje prolongado, pero ya después me fui por África y por Europa, por Asia y por otros lugares, ¿verdad? Que ustedes, si me siguen en las redes sociales, pues se enteraron posiblemente. La cosa es que quiero compartir un poquito de lo que viví en esos países con unas entrevistas de la gente de narración oral de esos lugares, principalmente de Canadá. Y es que pues yo le agradezco mucho a la vida que me haya encontrado con estas personas que van a ir conociendo entrevista por entrevista, porque pues son gente que ahora son mis amistades, son gente que amo, que respeto y que le agradezco a la vida que me haya encontrado con esas personas. Y vamos a empezar con Dan Yashinsky, espero estarlo pronunciando bien, Dan Yashinsky, que él es de Canadá y él es una autoridad, es una de las personas más destacadas en este mundo de los cuentacuentos en ese país y que además genera algunos espacios, me dio oportunidades de narrar, me dio su amistad, me invitó a estar inclusive en su casa varias veces y yo eso lo agradezco a la gente que me abre las puertas para poder ensayar. Ahí ensayábamos, tuvimos conversaciones, cenas y eso yo lo agradezco muchísimo. Y empecé esta conversación preguntándole a Dan, estoy cambiándole el nombre, a Dan, sobre cómo comenzó él en el mundo de los cuentos.
I probably have to go back to when I was little, when I was a child, and I grew up hearing a lot of stories about the war, My mother was a Holocaust survivor. So I heard a lot of stories, not so nice stories, about life before and then during the war. And I grew up listening to these stories. I was very interested. But I didn't think at the time that's storytelling or not storytelling. It's just how I was growing up. And then I fell in love with mythology. So Greek mythology, Roman mythology, Norse mythology, Zeus and Athena and the gods and also, and I loved all those stories. Then I fell in love with James Bond. And then I went to university and I studied Homer and, the Iliad and the Odyssey and all the big stories. I thought what was very beautiful.
In the university?
Was in the university at Santa Barbara. I went to University of California.
Okay. Yeah. But what career?
When was I there?
No, what career?
Oh, well, no, it was in literature. I studied literature. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. But the real beginning, those are like the background of storytelling for me. Holocaust stories, Greek mythology, Homer, the Iliad, the Odyssey. But the real beginning was when I worked at a summer camp for children when I moved to Canada from California. And it was a camp for very poor children. Very poor kids from the poor neighborhoods. And I worked there at the camp, and what I noticed is that at night, when we gathered the children around the fire, the campfire, didn't matter how wild they were all day long, when they sat by the fire to listen to stories, they were the most beautiful listeners in the world. And when I saw that, I thought, I want to learn how to do that. That seemed like magic to me. How do you just, a few words, you say it around the campfire, and because those words are in the form of a story, the children open up their soul. They open up their alma. Right? It was beautiful to see. And to me, it was a total mystery. How did that work? So I fell in love with storytelling. So every time I had a chance, I would go to the library in the city and I'd get books and books of stories to bring back to camp, which I would then read aloud to the kids. And that's when I saw how much they love folk tales and fairy tales, stories of dragons and adventure and romance and so on. So those kids taught me to be a storyteller.
Wow.
Yeah. And then one day I finally put the book down and I thought, okay, no book. I'm just going to tell it
Just
from
my
my head.
Just my voice.
Yeah. And then that was when I decided, okay, this is the coolest thing in the world.
Después le pregunté a Dan si él había tenido algún curso de artes escénicas, de narración oral, de teatro o algo así para saber cómo él se formó en el mundo de los cuentacuentos.
No, I studied literature, but I was never an actor. I didn't study performance.
But did you
I love performance, but I never studied it as a preparation for storytelling.
Did you have some mentor?
I did. Yeah. So I didn't go to any formal training, but I was very lucky because right in the beginning of my storytelling, I met an old woman. It's like a fairy tale, right? I met an old woman in the forest. I met an old woman who was a retired children's librarian.
Wow.
And her name was Alice Kane. Alice Kane, Kane. And I remember I fell in love with her. I was 23 maybe, and she was 65, in her 60s. She'd retired, 67 maybe. I was a hippie from California, basically. She was a very, just a beautiful woman from Ireland originally. And she was a master storyteller. She was a queen of storytelling.
Wow.
And her whole life she had spent telling to children. And then I came and I said, I want to learn about storytelling, not just for children, but for adults as well. Can I be with you? And so everywhere she went, I was with her to try to listen, to see what this storytelling was all about. Thanks.
Thank you.
Gracias, señor.
Llegó el tecito aquí con este frío que estamos en la calle. Muchas gracias.
No, de nada.
So that she was my mentor. I mean, first of all, I would say my friend. And she never told me anything directly. And it's true with great teachers. They don't ever say, you should do that or try that. No, it was just by example.
On the process. Wow.
She never told me, that's not your type of story. She just let me discover it all for myself. And I was terrible when I started. I was terrible.
I think me too. Okay.
I mean, every mistake it could be, I did it. I couldn't find the right stories. I didn't know how to be in public. I was very shy. I had a shitty memory. Couldn't remember anything.
But now you are a mentor. You are an authority in the storytelling world, at least here in Canada. So, and it's a privilege talking with you here right now. Cheers.
Well, everybody has to find a dragon. This is my theory. In the fairy tales, right? There's always a moment when you have to meet your dragon. You want to go on a quest. You want to find this. You want to find that in the stories. But until you meet the dragon, you cannot succeed. You have to face the dragon. And by that, I mean, there's something more powerful than you. You have to find out who you are when you are trying to struggle with the dragon.
Wow.
And Alice was my dragon.
Yeah.
And I feel very lucky because I've had 3 great dragons in my life. All of them old women. There was Alice Kane, Joan Bodger, and a native woman up in the Yukon, up in northern Canada called Angela Sidney. And all 3 of these women were my dragons. Mentors,
dragons.
Friends, mentors, friends, but also I realized right in the beginning of knowing them, they were great. The first 2 were great artists, Alice and Joan, and Angela Sidney was a great tradition keeper. So in the indigenous way, she would never call herself an artist.
It's an indigenous person?
Yeah, she was lived up in the north of Canada. And we loved each other. I mean, it was not my culture, very far from it. But somehow we got along and we shared a love of stories. But for her, it wasn't a matter of being an artist or an entertainer. For her, it was a matter of being a tradition keeper, someone who kept the stories alive for her people.
Yeah.
So those 3 were my dragons.
They have other goals,
It's different.
It's not just an expression on the stage. It's about
not a stage
community.
performance. Yes, exactly. They are carrying stories for the whole community. So I'd like to toast Alice, Joan, and Angela.
Yeah.
And they would love you too.
Hay pocos cuentacuentos en Canadá que se dedican a eso. O sea, bueno, por lo menos en el mundo anglosajón, en el mundo francófono es otra realidad. El asunto es de que en Toronto son muy poquitos quienes se dedican por entero a la narración oral. Algo más o menos diferente en México o en Latinoamérica, que vemos varios que nos dedicamos solo a la narración oral, combinada dando talleres de lo mismo o combinado con actividades escénicas, pues. El asunto es de que le hice esta pregunta, ¿no? Sobre, pues, cómo se dio cuenta de que esto también podía ser una forma de vida o era parte de toda una industria cultural.
So,
I mean, I'm probably the wrong person to ask about storytelling as a business because I've never...
well, not literally a business,
No, I know what you mean, but I've
please.
never made much money at it. And for many, many years, I was in the schools. That was my bread and butter. I worked with kids all over the place and festivals and so on. But it seems like all the things I'm most interested in don't pay very well.
Okay.
I don't know. That's just the way it is. Books, okay. But right from the beginning, all I wanted was to be a professional storyteller. That's what I wanted. I wanted to go back to the days of the troubadours and the bards and Homer and, the cultures where people could go out with stories. The griot in West Africa.
The griot, yeah.
That idea that it was a profession, that it wasn't only a nice hobby.
Después seguí indagando un poquito sobre el trabajo remunerado de la narración oral y bueno, específicamente ahí en Canadá, cómo lo percibía él y si él había tenido en el proceso de profesionalizarse, pues trabajos remunerados, dignos y con buen pago, pues, no solo de hobby.
So after many years of working in schools and doing jobs here and there, I started to do storytelling in places where I would be the storyteller in residence, we would call it, in residence. Meaning, not that I lived there, but meaning that I would go regularly to a place and I would be there to work with everybody in the group or in the organization, whatever it may be. So most recently, my job was to be the storyteller in residence at Baycrest Hospital here in Toronto, which is a very big hospital for old people. They call it the Baycrest Center for Geriatric Care or something like that. They changed the name too. Baycrest Health Sciences. Anyway, it doesn't matter, but I was there for 5 years telling stories every week. Right.
With salary?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Salary, pretty good salary, in psychiatry, in palliative care for the dying, rehab, visiting people one-on-one or being in a big group sometimes. And so that was a way to earn a living, but it's not stage storytelling. It's being a storyteller within an organization, or in this case, a hospital. And it was great for me because I really loved the chance to do storytelling. Let's say somebody in palliative care, my audience was somebody who's dying. So I would have to find a way to go into their room and listen to their stories, and tell stories from my repertoire or that I felt they would be meaningful to them. And it was wonderful. In fact, I call it responsive storytelling. Responsive. I sometimes I wouldn't know ahead of time what I was going to tell. I'd have to go in and listen, and then I would figure out, oh, okay, maybe this story would be meaningful to them. So it's a little different than preparing a script or doing a performance on stage. It's where you're telling in response to the audience, and the audience might be one person.
Esta parte de la conversación que continúa me gusta mucho porque él hace referencia a la responsabilidad de lo que significa ser el narrador de historias y el elegir las historias adecuadas para cada espacio. O sea, una gran responsabilidad.
But you see, the measure of success is different. Because if you're telling in a hospital, let's say you're telling to people very severely depressed, they come to the storytelling they can barely walk, some of them. They're so depressed. They've just had shock therapy, or they're taking meds, and they're coming and they're so crushed with depression. And they come to the little group and we have storytelling. And I look at them and I think, my God, what do I tell that will be meaningful to them, that will give them a sense of hope or life or whatever?
It's a very big responsibility.
It's a big responsibility. And then they're not going to clap. My success is not, oh, I've done such a great show. Clap, 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 clap. My measure of success for that audience is,
it's a smile.
To smile, or they walk away with a little bit more life than when they came.
Yeah.
Or they say, that reminds me of my own story. So that's a different way to think about it than straight performance.
I think it's other kind of bravo. No, it's other kind of...
It is, but it's very subtle.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And if you're used to stage performance, and I do a lot of that too, but you have to really change what you're expecting from them. Or palliative care. Walk into someone's room. There's their family. They're going to die in 2 or 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
What do you tell them?
Yeah.
You have to think, what story will reach them and be meaningful to their family too?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a whole other way of thinking about performance and storytelling. Yeah. But anyway, this is just to say that that's become a part of how I earned a living for these last few years.
Después encaminé la plática hacia Danu Social Club, que es un espacio allá, un barecito de otro colega que le mando un gran saludo también, lo voy a etiquetar, que cada segundo martes de mes tienen ahí cuentacuentos para personas adultas, porque el espectáculo es ya más o menos por la noche, dura a veces más de 2 horas y siempre hay una selección como de 4 o 5 personas que van a narrar, hay un intermedio en el medio y el asunto es de que ahí pude estar varias veces y a mí me sucedieron unas cosillas medio raras, negativas en el mundo de los cuentacuentos y ese lugar fue un lugar seguro para yo narrar, para no sentirme discriminada y yo le agradezco muchísimo y entonces le pregunté que nos hable un poquito sobre el Danu.
About a year and a half ago, a little bit more, a friend of mine bought a bar, about a little... what do you say, bodega? No, a bar. A bar.
Yes, bodega, it's other thing.
Yeah. And he asked me to do storytelling, and I said, okay, I'll do it on one condition. You have to make it wheelchair accessible, because this is one of my obsessions, right? And he did. He built a washroom for wheelchairs, and he did it. Very unusual in Toronto, but he did it. And then I started doing storytelling. This is we're starting to come out of the pandemic, so I wanted a place to have fun performing again.
Mm-hmm.
But it very quickly became a place for other people to tell. And then it became a place where new voices could come. But the one thing about it is because I love folk tales, I love traditional stories. So that's what we do at Danu. Now, they can be very remixed stories. So you don't have to tell it just this is the exact way from Brothers Grimm or anything else. It can be very original. It can be very remixed versions. But my interest was folk tales. So it's been a lot of fun to have you coming because you bring such a artistic training. Mm-hmm. But many of the people at Danu have never been involved in storytelling before. They come from different professions or they're in their 20s and early 30s. So kind of a new group of people to come into the art form. No one gets paid. I buy my own drinks at Danu. It's just a chance to experiment with stories. And to build a sense of artistic excitement. To me, storytelling is a cool art. And one of the things I worry about sometimes is that's why I got involved. When I was in my 20s, I thought, man, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard of. Mm-hmm. Storytelling. You know all the stories in your head. You just speak the words. Mm-hmm. You don't need to put on and people will listen to you. So I wanted to create a place. So Danu, if anyone's listening, come to Toronto, come to Danu and enjoy stories.
Mm-hmm. And thank you so much because you you gave me a lot of opportunities to tell stories there in that place, and I think was the perfect place for me, you know, a safe place for me, you know, I could tell folk tales about my land, about my state, my country. I was telling stories about Zacatecas and other places in Mexico, so thank you for that.
Devils and prostitutes and everything in between.
Yeah.
Ay, esta parte me gusta porque ya empieza a hablar de mí. Empieza pues a decir lo que opina de mi trabajo, y pues bueno, yo ahí me sonrojo un poquito, ¿verdad? Porque bueno, pues dijo cosas lindas.
Yeah, I love your way of telling, and it's so expressive and dramatic in a good way. You know, sometimes I find the storytelling, it's a funny art because you're listening to a story, and if the storyteller does all the work and they put on such a big show, you know, you're just sitting there, you're watching, but you're not making it with the storyteller. But you have a way that's both dramatic and very engaging, but I also feel like I'm part of the story. Mm-hmm. I'm not just a spectator watching you perform. Mm-hmm. So it's not easy, right? It's a hard art. I think it's a very hard art.
It is.
Not only that, and I'll just say one more thing about the art itself. I think the hardest part of it is finding the right story. That was, to me, the hard thing, especially for new storytellers. How do you find the right story for your voice and your moral beliefs and your philosophy?
I think that is important. I read a lot of stories, you know, and sometimes I love some stories, but sometimes I can't tell that story. Why? I don't know.
Yeah, I know exactly.
Or maybe I have to wait the perfect moment to tell that story. Sometimes it's difficult, you know, to get or to find the correct story for your voice or for yourself.
Absolutely, yeah.
Ya para finalizar esta conversación, le pregunté si tenía algunas recomendaciones para los nuevos cuentacuentos o para la gente que se quiera dedicar pues de lleno a esto, o a la gente curiosa, ¿no? Que llegue a Toronto y quiera escuchar historias, a dónde puede ir, qué puede encontrar en esa ciudad con respecto a los cuentacuentos.
We have in Toronto, there's something that's been going for many, many years, every single Friday, called 1001 Friday Nights of Storytelling, where we love you there too. And you've seen that group. And every type of story can be told. So that's still happening. It's been started in 1978 and it's still happening every Friday, right? Yeah. And then there's Danu, and there are other places where people tell, true stories, true life stories, things that have happened to them. But I think it's a bigger question than,
you don't recommend anyone to approach to
I recommend
work?
me.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm always open. I'm looking for new voices. At my age, I'm looking for the new generation. If it's people my age that's going to carry the torch for storytelling, we're in bad shape. We need the new storytellers to come in, to be passionate, to read everything, to listen to everything, to meet their dragons, you know, so I would say that, and storytelling is one of those arts. It doesn't matter how many books you read, how many workshops you take. Ultimately, you're going to learn one-on-one by listening to somebody you love and respect. That's how you're going to learn.
Totally.
It's one of those art forms that transmits better live between people. So, and take workshops and do all of that, but still find your dragon. That's what I would say.
Find your dragon.
And you know, wherever you live in the world, and now you can even find them online, I suppose, but mostly
there are dragons all over around the world.
Everywhere, right. And you always know it's, and you know it because they make you feel two things. One, like you have so much to learn, and two, that maybe you'll learn it one day. You know, so it's that feeling of, oh my gosh, how could they be so great? But that, because they are great, and because you're friends with them, you think, well, one day maybe I'll crack the code Maybe I'll learn the secret power.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one day I'll have a little tiny bit of what they bring to storytelling. And at least that was true for all the people that I love in storytelling, the people I really learned from. And some of them still here, and you've met some of them at Daniel. And in fact, you're one of them, because every time you tell, I'm paying attention. I'm thinking, wow, how does César Rincón do that? So, it's just one of those arts. And the last thing to say about it, we're at the beginning of storytelling renaissance. It doesn't matter. People have been doing it for a while, but we're still at the very beginning of making a place for storytelling in our society. We've barely begun. We're just learning. What does it mean? What stories are important? What's a good way of performing? Where's the audience coming from? How do you get paid? What are the artistic standards? All of those are questions. Nobody has any answers, which is good. I don't like answers. I much prefer the questions.
Sometimes the answer is a process, a long process.
It's gotta be. Right. Anybody who says, I know the right way, they're full of...
Okay. Thank you so much,
César. Okay.
It's really an honor, because you are my dragon. Thank you. Yeah, exactly.
Esa ha sido la entrevista que le hice a Dan Yashinsky. Le agradezco, le abrazo. Seguramente nos volveremos a ver, no sé cuándo exactamente. Yo voy a hacer lo posible para que venga a México a narrar. Yo le traduzco, le contratamos un traductor. No sé cómo le vamos a hacer para que vengan a conocer su trabajo, que en realidad lo admiro muchísimo. Él fue uno de mis maestros allá en Canadá y de las personas con las que yo me sentía seguro. Y bueno, recuerden suscribirse aquí a mi canal, a las redes sociales, pueden seguirme y pueden enterarse de más cosas que hago, las funciones que tengo, los espectáculos que doy aquí en la Ciudad de México o en otros estados también, y inclusive en otros países cuando voy a festivales. Y bueno, pues muchísimas gracias, hasta luego, y en una semana viene otra entrevista con otra personalidad de la narración oral en Canadá o el mundo. Bye.